Fab. So without further ado, let's get started on solving PPC data loss with accurate conversion tracking. My name is Dan Jenkins. I'm the commercial director here at Wagada Digital. I've been with the agency now for, gosh, 7.5, coming up 8 years. I'd love to get connected on LinkedIn, take the conversation further. So don't hesitate to scan that QR code you can see there on the screen if you'd like to reach out and get connected. But otherwise, I'll reach out and we'll get connected over on there and take the conversation further forward. But it's not all about me. I'm part of a large team of experts based across 3 locations. We have offices in London, St Albans, and Cheltenham here at Wagada Digital. I'm currently zooming in from our London office today. And we have a whole team of specialists in core areas, including digital marketing and AI marketing solutions. We're HubSpot Platinum partners, so we offer CRM solutions. We execute employer branding strategies. And we do web design, web development as well. Yeah, we've got a wide range of expertise, and one of our fantastic experts is on the call with us here today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Jordan. Oh, there was one other thing there, just Jordan, I think, on that slide. As I just mentioned, we are HubSpot partners. So if anybody would like to take advantage of our spot check, if you are a HubSpot user, scan that QR code and our team will give your HubSpot a full, no pressure review and offer you feedback. That's something that we've kept running by popularity. So if you are using HubSpot, don't hesitate to take a look at that. If you're not using HubSpot, why not? Let's chat about it. So over to you, Jordan.
Cheers. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, so I'm Jordan. I'm the PPC manager here at Wagada with experience across Google Ads, Meta Ads, LinkedIn Ads, and so on. Been in the sort of the PPC world for the past nearly 7 years now, and been a member of the Wagada team since 2024. So been here now, got my feet under the table, so to speak, and happy to go through what will be hopefully quite an interesting topic, which is conversion tracking. It's quite a big topic at the moment in terms of making sure that we know where our marketing efforts are going to. So just to go over what we'll cover today. So first of all, we'll look at conversion tracking in today's privacy first world, look at kind of how it used to be before and now how it is these days. Some uncomfortable truths that we have to sort of set our mindset to around conversion tracking, identifying how conversion tracking should work and where common drop-offs occur. We'll also look at some best practices for setting up scalable conversion tracking so that once you've set it once, you don't have to keep going back to it. And then finally, we'll look at some advanced techniques such as enhanced conversions and server-side tracking. So to start off, I just want to make sure everyone is up to speed in terms of what conversion tracking is. So it's the process of measuring valuable actions that take place after clicking an ad that goes to your website. So it helps you see which ads, keywords, or audiences are actually driving results, not just the clicks. So some examples of what those conversions could look like could be form submissions on your website. It could be purchases or sales, any phone calls that come from people clicking on your number on the website, or maybe newsletter signups, registrations, or even so far as button clicks that are like book now or get quote. So how it used to look like, it was much simpler back in the old days before sort of some of the cookie laws came into play. So back then it was primarily cookie based, very browser dependent, and really just a way for marketers to see what happened after an ad click happened. There wasn't that much complexity. And the technology itself didn't play a huge role in optimizing the campaigns. You'll find in the next slide that that's actually changed quite a bit. So back then, tracking was mainly for reporting purposes. You would run campaigns, you would look at the last click conversions and make decisions manually. Attribution models were primitive, usually on a last click basis. So whoever or wherever that last click came from would usually get 100% of the credit for that conversion. And that was considered generally good enough because customer journeys weren't as fragmented as they are today. So because people use fewer devices and fewer channels, there was far less data loss as well. That's obviously changed quite a lot in quite a few years since roughly 2016, I would say. So customer journeys are now non-linear with people switching devices and channels more than ever. And this creates a far more touch points and many more opportunities for that data to be lost. It's quite common for maybe people to jump between 2 or 3 devices before actually making a purchase or submitting a lead form. And we have to be able to try and track their customer journey throughout that process. But there's also been changes to privacy. So privacy expectations have also changed with stricter browser rules and user consent controls. So cookies basically get in the way a little bit. It means that the tracking is no longer guaranteed. So ad platforms have sort of reacted to this. So they now rely a lot more on modeling and machine learning to try and fill in those gaps. So for us, for marketers, that means adapting to a world where perfect tracking isn't really possible. Our job is to provide the cleanest, strongest signals and make sure that what we are reporting on is as accurate as possible, so that we can then try and fill in the gaps through those machine learning and modeling capabilities. It leads me to something that maybe some of you might have come across before, whereby you have a single source of truth, perhaps maybe your e-commerce platform, if you're an e-commerce website, or maybe a website leads sort of tool. You'll find that maybe the numbers in your Google Analytics or in your Google Ads don't quite match up to reality. So we get this very common sort of scenario whereby Analytics will be saying we've had maybe 83 leads. Google Ads might be saying we've had 93, but the actual truth of the matter is when we count them one by one is that we've had 97. So is that an error or is that an attribution issue? The fact is a little bit of both, which leads me to the first uncomfortable truth, which is 100% conversion accuracy is next to impossible these days. There are too many things that can get in the way and do get in the way. So even with a flawless setup, no tracking system can capture every conversion perfectly. There will always be gaps, especially with modern privacy restrictions such as cookie consent modes. iOS iOS devices are particularly privacy much more stricter when it comes to user privacy. There's also things such as browser limitations, ad blockers. People use ad blockers quite a lot these days, especially on desktop. Network issues. We've just had a Cloudflare issue just this past week that would have affected probably some tracking. People deleting their cookies, or just users switching devices mid-journey. These all things can interrupt the tracking process. On top of that, you've then got attribution differences. So a lot of the different ad platforms, such as Google Ads, Meta Ads, LinkedIn Ads, even GA4, they all count conversions in a slightly different way. Meta, as an example, likes to take 100% of the credit for any conversion that happened, whereby Meta had a sort of a moment in that conversion journey, whether that's just an impression of an ad on their platform. So you got to take it with a pinch of salt when you compare all these different platforms. So the goal has shifted. We're not aiming for perfection anymore. We're aiming for reliable, consistent, and directionally accurate data that you can trust for optimizing and reporting. So the way I would look at it is, as long as you can get close to 100% of your conversion data being accurate, in a way, it doesn't matter if you're missing that maybe 5 or 2 or 5%. It won't probably move the needle that much more in terms of how it interacts with your campaigns. So the uncomfortable truth number 2 is that conversion tracking now affects how campaigns perform. So this is different to maybe sort of 5 or 6 years ago. But today, conversion tracking isn't just about reporting. It directly influences how your campaigns perform. So modern PPC, they run on a combination of machine learning and conversion data that you feed into the system. So those conversion signals guide optimization decisions. Smart bidding uses them to understand what good performance looks like. So it informs the campaigns who to target, how much to bid for, when to target. When these signals are wrong or incomplete, so when these conversion data signals that we're sending to the campaigns are incorrect or not as accurate as possible, the algorithms will effectively learn the wrong things. So that's why quality tends to matter more than quantity. A smaller number of accurate, clean conversions will always outperform a larger number of what we'd call noisy or unreliable ones. Stronger signals lead to stronger learning and ultimately stronger campaign results. So the problem in a nutshell is this: conversion tracking now has a material impact on how we run campaigns, but we can't realistically see 100% of all those conversions. We're working with an incomplete data set. So the solution is to build for accuracy, but not perfection. You don't need that perfect data. You just need trustworthy data that drives confident optimization decisions. You need the data that you feed into those campaigns to be accurate as possible, even if that's not all of the conversion data that you have or want. So you basically get what you put in. So good conversion data could look like things such as accurate real business outcomes, qualified leads, sales, newsletter signups, that type of thing. And that good conversion data will also consistently fire just once per true event. You don't want any duplicates or misfires. Very common for people to double click on buttons on the website. My mum still does it, for example. You need to make sure that when that happens, that it's only sending that one conversion data signal back rather than two, because really there hasn't been two conversions there. There's been one person that's clicked on it twice. And you also want to try and include enhanced signals. So enhanced signals is basically extra data within that conversion, such as first-party data or any consented user info, maybe what page that conversion happened, what browser the user was using. If you include all this information and feed it back into the campaign, your end result is that you get you feed the algorithm clear feedback loops for optimization and leads to faster learning, smarter bidding, and more efficient spend. Now, on the flip side, if you're feeding it bad conversion data, then the end result is obviously the opposite. So bad conversion data could look like something like soft or misleading actions. So page views or time on site is generally not recommended as conversion actions. People scroll into the bottom of the page. That's another conversion action that we tend to stay away from, because there's not a material business need or business outcome from that. That's just simply tracking what that user does on the website. You don't want to include any duplicates or missing conversions, so that confuses the algorithm. So again, similar to what I just said about my my mum's double clicking there, you don't want to include those duplicates. And inconsistent or delayed firing, that breaks attribution models as well. So you want to make sure that that conversion fires at the moment that the actual action happens. You don't want to wait a little bit longer in case there's a page reload or there's a potential server issue. But you don't want to do it too early either. You don't want to send, for example, a purchase conversion when people get to the final page of that customer journey. You want to make sure that they've actually clicked on buy towards the end. So the end result, if you're submitting bad conversion data, is to feed noisy or low value signals. That leads to poor campaign decisions, slows down optimization, and inflates or hides the true performance. So this is a very basic sort of setup of how conversion tracking should work. Obviously, it can become a little bit more complicated for that, but for this sort of reason, we'll try and just drill down the 5 elements that almost have to happen for every single conversion. So first of all, the user has to click on an ad. The ad platform will then log that interaction. At that point, your landing page should load, and when the landing page loads, you want your tracking tag to activate. So that tracking tag is basically going to track that user interaction on that page. We then wait for the user to complete an action that we deem to be something that of value, such as completing a form or purchasing a product online. At the moment that happens, we want the conversion tag to fire when the user clicks on submit in the case of the example of the form. And at that point, that data is then sent back to the ad platforms. The final step then is that the ad platform will use that data on a continual sort of basis to measure results and optimize campaigns. So of these 5 steps, there can obviously be a few steps in between. People can bounce between pages, for example. They could lead to some other action. But these 5 steps will always sort of happen. There's 2 steps where it can go wrong in terms of conversion tracking, and that is predominantly on step 2 and step 4. So when the landing page loads, there's a potential that your tracking tag doesn't become activated. If that happens, then that invalidates the next 3 steps anyway. You won't actually be able to track anything because the initial tracking tag hasn't become activated. The second option is if your conversion tag doesn't fire correctly the moment the user clicks on submit in our example for a form. So that means that that data is not sent back to the ad platform, so we can't report on it, but we also means that the ad platform can't use that data to inform the campaign optimizations. So just to go over kind of what we mean by those 2 steps, if we look at the tracking tag troubleshooting, for example, first. So tracking tags, or pixels, they're also known as. They're small pieces of code that live on your website and monitor user interactions automatically. I like to think of it a little bit as a digital sensor, or you may also know it as an Alexa. So it watches for what a user does and then sends a signal back to the platform, in this case, maybe Google Ads or GA4, letting it know what just happened. So it's basically listening for user interactions around their website. So that could be, again, clicking on certain buttons on the website. It could be scrolling down. It could be playing a video, or clicking on a PDF download, etc., etc. So when there's an issue with tracking tags, it's usually quite easy to spot because not just your conversions will start to be erroneous or might not track, but everything will be off. So even when you're looking on your reports about how many users came to your site, that will probably be very, very low if you have a tracking tag issue. So this often indicates that there's something on the site interfering with the tag rather than a problem with individual conversions. There's many reasons why this can sort of stop working. I've got 5 listed there. So you've got cookies. Cookies can always play a factor in it. Also, if you've maybe recently launched a new website or maybe a new subdomain website, it's very possible that maybe that tag hasn't been implemented. So that can also be a reason why your tracking starts to not work. We then got plugins. A lot of websites use WordPress or similar CMSs, and plugins are little bits of code that help you have more functionality with your website. The code for this is usually in the same space as the tracking tag code, and they can sometimes interfere with each other. We then just got straight up incorrect implementation. If the code that has the tracking tag on it is incorrect, or maybe it's in the incorrect place on the website, that could also play a factor. And then finally, duplicate tags can also happen, especially if you have a large website with maybe multiple subdomain, whereby you may have the tag on twice. That can also be a reason why your tracking tag starts to play up. On the second sort of potential reason why things can go wrong is when your conversion tag starts to play up. So conversion tags are basically a special type of tracking tag, and they're designed to monitor only specific actions. So previously, the tracking tag pretty much tracks everything. Conversion tags are very, very specific actions. So a purchase, a form submission, newsletter sign up, etc. So they're only meant to fire when the particular event you care about occurs. So while a general tracking tag can sit across your whole website and capture overall activity, you want to make sure that there's only one conversion tag for each of the events that you want to track. Now, because they are event specific, it's a little bit difficult, or a little bit more difficult, to troubleshoot these. They can be a little bit easier to miss. So issues might only affect a single action. Maybe most of your conversion tracking is working correctly, but there's just one form maybe that isn't. So it's important to test each conversion tag individually to ensure they fire correctly. And I'm going to go through some of these 5 sort of potential reasons why they might not be working. But first of all, just want to kind of cover what a conversion event looks like. So a conversion event is usually, we would recommend, you can do it in other ways, but we would recommend set them up in Google Tag Manager. It's the easiest way to set up any type of conversion tracking as a whole. And it uses 2 key components. There's a tag and then there's the trigger. And the best way to describe each one of them is the conversion tag is the what. So what you want to track, what you want to consider a conversion. The trigger is the when. So when should this tag fire? So in our example here, we've got a conversion tag and it has 3 little bits of information. It has a main tracking tag ID, which is effectively an account ID. It makes sure it goes to the right account to your tracking platform. You then want to give it a name. Best practice is to make sure to keep it all in one word with no spaces, and try and keep it short. You don't want it to be too long, otherwise some third-party reporting platforms will actually struggle with the length of the conversion name. And then finally, you want to give it as much optional data as you can, provided that it's useful information. You don't want to include information for the sake of it, but things that could be useful to have within that conversion would be such as the form ID, or which form on your website this relates to. It could be the page location, so where that conversion happened. It could be any first-party user information, if provided they've consented to cookies. You can send that information as well. That's the tag. In terms of the trigger tells you when to fire. So for example, we've got an example of a form submission. So we want to make sure that we only trigger this tag when the form is submitted, but only the form that is on the contact us page. We don't want to be tracking, in this particular conversion, all the other forms that you might have on your website. We just want to be tracking the one on your contact us page. So the conversion trigger gives you conditions that need to be fulfilled in order for the tag to fire. So we're going to go over some common conversion troubleshooting here. So if your reports are showing fewer conversions than maybe you expect, it's possible that the conversion events aren't firing when they should. It's quite a common issue that can make campaigns look like they're underperforming when maybe in reality they aren't. So most often than not, this happens because the trigger is misconfigured. it is important to double check that the trigger conditions match the actual action you want to track, whether it's a form submission, it's a button click, or a page view. A good example of this would be, say, for example, you have a thank you page that loads after a form submission and you want to track the thank you page. Bear in mind that that is technically a page that could be reloaded at any time. So they may continue on their sort of journey of looking through some other website, and when you click on back and back and you keep going back to the previous page, it might actually reload that thank you page. Guess what? That fires another conversion off. So you want to be making sure that all the trigger conditions are actually being met correctly. The other factors that can also prevent this from firing, cookies may be blocked for privacy settings, or ad blockers that can also play a factor in it, or maybe the page load or redirect issues may prevent the tag from executing as well. We always recommend whenever this happens to make sure you test the setup in a debug mode or in a preview mode, so you can help identify and fix those problems. Like I said, we find that this is quite a common issue with conversion tracking, but it's usually probably the easiest ones to troubleshoot. Ones that are a little bit more difficult to troubleshoot is when events are double firing. So you may notice sometimes that your conversion event is being counted twice. Again, you will need to maybe check what your source of truth is saying versus what your reporting is saying. But this can inflate your reports and confuse optimization algorithms for the campaigns. Generally, again, it's another trigger issue more often than not, and we do find it's more of an issue with lead gen rather than e-commerce conversion tracking. One thing to note on your reports is one very clear way to maybe be suspicious that your events are double counting is if your conversion events are always an even number for every day. So if you say maybe the first of the month is you have 4 conversions, the next day you have 8, the next day you have 6, the next day you have 2, you never have maybe a 1 or a 3 or a 5. That typically means there's probably some double counting happening there, because if you double any number, it will always result in an even number. So that's always a quick and easy way to maybe distinguish whether there is some double counting happening there. So an example of why this might be happening might be the tag might be set to fire on both a click and a page load, or maybe a form submission is being counted twice, maybe both on when the form is submitted, where you actually click on the submit button, but then also maybe firing again on your thank you page. So that means it's counting twice. Other potential issues could be duplicate tags. You might have 2 tracking tags on the page, or you might also find that some JavaScript issues cause the same event to fire multiple times as well. So this is becoming actually something we're finding a little bit more common these days, maybe as websites get a little bit more complicated, a little bit more complex, with more sort of scripting in the header of the web page. We find that sometimes can cause some interference with the tracking code. So again, as before, we always recommend doing extensive testing before setting anything live. The next sort of 2 are sort of similar in sort of how to resolve these. So events firing too early or too late, or with incomplete data. So if an event fires too early, that can inflate your numbers by counting actions that actually haven't completed. But then obviously if it fires too late, it might actually miss the conversion entirely, especially if the page reloads before that tag can actually arrive to your platform. The timing issues are usually caused by, again, trigger misconfigurations. So that will usually mean that the main trigger action needs some adjustment, but diagnosing that it's quite dependent on a number of different factors. But one solution that we like to use these days is something called data layer events. So just for those who don't know what data layers are, so data layers is basically a separate structured message that your website sends to signal a specific action has occurred. You could almost slightly call it as a little bit of a saved bit of information that will send regardless of what's happening on the website. So what you can do is you can set your trigger to listen for the data layer events rather than your normal conversion tracking events. That approach is more reliable, but the slight issue with that is it does require some developer support to implement. It's not as easy as just adding a little bit more information on your trigger. You do need your website to be able to collect data layer events. So there's a little bit more nuance to it. And in terms of events firing but without incomplete data, That is usually just a tag misconfiguration. So you can always include data within your conversion tag that you want to capture. So you just need to make sure that that's being captured correctly. Or if there's things that are missing, you might need to add that to your conversion. And then finally, the one that's the most annoying maybe to troubleshoot is cookies. So cookies play a crucial role in conversion tracking. If a user does not consent to cookies, some or all of your tracking may be blocked, which can lead to underreported conversions. There is something that some people may have heard of called Google Consent Mode V2. So there are basically two forms of consent mode. There is basic and advanced. The basic one basically does not load your tags if people reject cookies. If I come to a website and I reject cookies and there is not advanced consent mode enabled, then the tags theoretically should not be firing at all, and you will not see that user's interactions on the website, including conversions. However, with advanced consent mode, you can. So the issue can be mitigated by implementing that correctly. So this allows the tags to still fire, but they fire in a privacy compliant way, sending only the data that users have consented to share. If they've only consented the most basic of cookies, then it will send the data to your platform, and it will only track those bits and that the website will show. So that will be, say, for example, we know that a conversion has happened, but we can't tell you what browser they use, where they were located, so on and so forth. It would just keep the absolute minimum of data. But even with consent mode in place, there will still be some data loss, but at least using advanced consent mode, it will ensure some tracking does continue in a responsible and consented manner. So just to go over some key things to consider when setting up tags and triggers. So you want to think about scalability, first of all. Do you want one form event for all your forms, or do you want each form on your website to have its own conversion? So you need to remember, when sort of coming up with which solution is best for you, that tags can hold additional info. So when a form event happens, you can send additional info, such as where that conversion happened or what form was used. If you regularly add a lot of different pages to your website, or you make a lot of adjustments to your forms, if you do that, you need to make sure that your conversion tracking is still going to work. So whether that is setting up new conversion tracking, which can be tedious, or making sure that they still work for that initial, like, grand scale umbrella form conversion that you set up initially. Also consider user journey. So before making a purchase, users will likely add a product to the basket. They'll then go to the checkout. They'll then enter their payment details. They might then also add their address details. Do you want to track all of that? Usually we would suggest that the user journeys, while they can include multiple steps, we only really want to consider conversions to be that end goal. So very useful to know how many people are getting as far as the checkout but not actually converting. But the tracking tag can do that. For conversions, we just want to prioritize the actual end goal, which in this case would be a purchase or a sale. Thirdly, websites, they generally see newsletter signups as forms, because technically they are in terms of code. The code used for a newsletter signup is the same as used for any other form. So you may want to differentiate them when it comes to your conversion tracking. You may want newsletter signups to be separate from general form submissions. So if that's the case, you need to make sure that's you keep that aware when you're setting up your trigger, for example, to make sure that it either discounts or includes newsletter signups when you're setting up form conversion tracking, for example. Fourthly, when introducing new elements to your website, will existing conversion tracking suffice? After any major change with the website or new pages are created, I would always recommend that you test your conversion tracking to make sure nothing has been broken, or that the new pages are actually tracking as you expect them to be. Very, very common issue we come across is pages being added to a website, and then we find that the tracking isn't actually implemented for those new pages. So always keep an eye on that. Another one that we come across fairly frequently is whether websites are using third-party elements on the website via iframes. some of you might know what iframes are, but they're effectively embedded elements on your website from other websites. So they could be calendar bookings. Calendly is a common one that we see. Maybe other forms that have been hosted elsewhere but are visible on your website. Calculators as well is another one. If you're using those elements,
Just very quick, sorry,
yeah,
Jordan, we
yeah,
actually had a question come through on that one,
yeah,
which would be really beneficial if you're able to just dive in a little bit more depth about the third party. This
yeah,
question, though, I think was more relating to if it's also taking you to another site, like another booking engine. So it
yeah,
might be worth kind of talking through, I guess, the challenges of that, but then
yeah,
also how we can get the most out of those
yeah.
situations or how we can combat that.
Yeah. So just in terms of the embedding within the site, your tracking code will very likely not see them. So you need to keep that aware, keep in mind that when you're looking at that. In terms of booking engines, yeah, again, very common issue that we come across for e-commerce platforms, whereby you might have your main website, and then if you want to go to maybe book a hotel stay or something like that, it goes to a completely separate website to do that. The general answer is no. Your tracking will stop the moment they jump off your website and they go to the new one. Now, the way around it is if you're able to set up your tracking code on this second website, on this booking website. So if it's a booking website you effectively control, quite likely you'll be able to continue that customer journey. If it's a booking website that is completely a third party that you don't have any sort of say in how they run their website, quite frankly, yes, your tracking will stop at that point. So it's a really important one to make mention. You find sometimes this is not just the case with bookings, but also checkouts. So maybe just you sell products on your website, and the moment you go to the basket, you might also go to a separate website, technically speaking. Again, provided it's sort of a website that you control, you can keep tracking. It does require a little bit more of a complex setup, but it is by all means possible. It's just whether you control that booking engine or not. If it's ended it somewhere else, then it basically their tracking takes over, so to speak. So yeah, a really good question that. And then in terms of just finally, just looking through the different type of triggers before configuring your trigger, there are quite a lot of options there. So the example I've put in there is, do you want to track when a form is submitted or when the thank you page loads? There can be reasons to use both. In this instance, I would probably hedge my bets towards the form submission rather than the thank you page, but there can be user cases where you might want to track the other. So just bear in mind when you're creating triggers that there are quite a lot of options to choose from, and some might fit better than others. Okay, so moving on towards the end of the presentation now, I've just got two what I call sort of more advanced techniques or things that are a little bit more newer in terms of enhanced conversions for Google Ads, although I have to say this is now becoming more prevalent in Microsoft Ads as well, and I think Meta is starting to do this as well. But enhanced conversions basically help fill in the gaps in your tracking by securely sending first-party customer information within the conversion tag. So a little bit like email, phone address, your main address. You can include those in your conversions so that it allows the advertising platform to match conversions that your browser-based tags may have missed. So they can improve attribution accuracy and provide cleaner, stronger signals for machine learning models by matching hashed information to users even when cookies are blocked. So this helps campaigns make better bidding decisions and optimize more effectively. So overall, enhanced conversions, they reduce missing conversion gaps and support conversion modeling, helping your reporting remain reliable even in a privacy-first environment. This is something that's it really is depending on your cookie banner. You have to have the cookie consent signals be correct. If you don't have a working cookie banner, or your cookies are not managed correctly, you can't use enhanced conversions. Basically, what this does is it uses the information it can get. So Google, the conversion, sorry, it uses the information it can get to then inform the things that it's missing. And I mentioned there that it supports conversion modeling. I just wanted to go into that a little bit more detail because people might not know what conversion modeling is. So conversion modeling is Google's way of estimating conversions that can't be directly tracked. So often due to privacy changes, as I mentioned just with the cookies there, or maybe some technical issues as well. So it fills in the gaps instead of relying solely on what the tags can see. Now, you might think, okay, is this just guessing? Well, it's not quite guessing, because while it isn't a direct measurement, it is making a very informed estimate based on large data sets, which is basically those conversions that you are able to track. Probability, if, for example, users get to a certain stage regularly, chances are they may eventually make that sale or make that form submission. Behavioral patterns, and then verified conversions. So Google draws on all of this to basically paint a picture, to fill in the gaps, which hopefully the gaps will be very small. You know, if your conversion tracking is accurate for 90%, it only needs to fill in that extra 10%. And even then, look, it won't still be perfect, but it will give you a better sort of idea of what you're missing out on. And then finally, we've got server-side tracking. So server-side tracking, that is a new way to, well, it's not new, but it's an alternative way to track conversions. Rather than tracking what happens on the browser, it actually tracks what happens on the server. So it sends conversion data from your server directly to the ad platforms rather than relying solely on the user browser interactions. So this can make tracking more reliable. It's less affected by ad blockers, it's less affected by cookie restrictions or any browser limitations. And there are some clear benefits such as better data accuracy, improved privacy compliance, and so on and so forth. So sounds great, right? But there is a catch, as usual. And the catch is it's basically an ongoing cost. So it is much more complex setup and does require fairly constant maintenance. It is effectively a server that needs to be constantly managed. The ongoing costs for that, for hosting that server, will be not insurmountable, but for many businesses they might be. It is also a single point of failure. So if the server goes down, that's it. All of your conversion setup is completely, invisible until that is resolved. There's also some limitations in terms of client-side data. So when we mean client-side data, we mean actions that take place on your browser, on the website, on the browser, but are not sent to the server. So this could be things such as maybe clicking on a button that makes something appear. For example, that doesn't necessitate a server call. There's a few other examples there, but it won't be able to track that because it's not happening on the server. And then finally, it's still not 100% perfect. Again, people can switch devices at any time, so that could disrupt that. So generally speaking, is it worth it for maybe the small, medium business enterprises? I would say the short answer is no. I think there is more value in a clean, reliable tracking setup on the browser that is configured well. Again, bear in mind, if it is configured well, you should still be getting the vast majority of your conversions. You're only making up this small extra bit, really. But yeah, it is now something that is becoming a little bit more common to see, especially in those bigger sort of corporations that can take on the extra cost. So in terms of some final takeaways, 100% accurate conversion tracking is no longer realistic, but that's okay. We can get with a correct setup, we can get the vast majority of it. We can focus on strong, privacy-safe signals rather than perfection. Configuring enhanced conversion, consent mode, and scalable tracking for increased accuracy. We can also make sure that clean tracking setups, clear conversion definitions, and good triggers go a long way. Always recommend to test it multiple times. In fact, I would say don't ever stop testing it. If you can, make a monthly sort of task to just go through your conversion setup, spend a couple of hours a month just to make sure that everything's working as you expect it to. And then finally, yeah, reliable data leads to a better machine learning performance and ultimately stronger PPC results. This is probably the biggest thing that maybe is not as well known outside of marketers. Campaigns these days really actually need the conversion tracking to actually inform how the campaigns perform. A lot of that was done manually back in the day. These days, a lot of these campaigns have AI sort of tools. It will manage sort of signals better than any human can. So we really need those conversion signals to be as accurate as possible, to make sure that the campaigns operate at the best capacity possible. And that is it. So yeah, hope that was helpful for everyone. And yeah, any questions for anyone?
Thank you so much, Jordan. Really appreciate that. If anybody has any further questions, please don't hesitate to pop them in the chat. I know we covered that one off a little bit earlier about kind of third party and third party landing pages and things like that. one thing I wanted to ask very quickly, just kind of tapping into what you mentioned at the end there about the pursuit of
Hmm.
perfection, and I guess
Yep.
this is a bit of a blue sky thinking kind of marketing question, really. But
Yep.
um, obviously, more and more now with kind of the adoption of AI, automation at scale, data, but then also privacy and data restrictions. Do you think that the pursuit of perfection can sometimes come at the detriment of just making progress, doing things, getting things out there? I guess I'm curious really as to your thought between the balance of, of perfection and just making
Hmm.
sure that you get effective campaigns running that, have a
Yep.
reach and a level of engagement, and where you draw the line on that. It's a bit of an open-ended question really, but I
Yeah.
guess just to understand your
I,
thoughts on
I
that.
I would say it's probably a question of how much work you want to put into getting that extra 2% of data, really. Like I said,
Yeah,
if obviously we're assuming if conversion tracking is set up correctly and everything like that, you'll get most of the puzzle pieces there. You'll just be missing a couple, and that in a Google Ads point of view, in a campaign point of view, that really won't move the needle. As long as
yeah,
most of the bulk of it is correct and accurate, and you're feeding those good signals, the campaign won't change course just because it's missing a very small percentage of conversion. So it's just a case of whether you want to commit all that time to really trying to get perfection, which, like I said, I believe is just not possible anyway.
yeah,
A very sort of real world example is I could be spending a month researching holidays on my mobile and on my computer, and the moment where I come to realize, okay, I know what holiday I want to get, I want to book this particular holiday, my phone dies, and so I go to my partner and say, can I just borrow your phone to get this holiday booked? Now that's all good. They'll be able to track that conversion, but they won't be able to track that whole customer journey. And so
mm,
that data
mm,
is
mm.
almost lost in terms of sending that back up to the campaign. So that's just a real world issue whereby the conversion tracking will be good because it will be accurate, it'll be one sale, but you're missing a lot of context, and so that's why we say it's not possible for it to be perfect anymore, because it's that can happen.
Yeah,
And obviously there's other reasons why things can happen, like like the Cloudflare issue I just mentioned, I think earlier on, like
yeah,
that would have broken, I think that broke 20% of the internet, I heard.
that's right. Yeah,
That will include some conversion tracking. I'm
yeah,
very sure about that. So yeah,
yeah,
it's as long as you're striving for as good as possible, I think that's sufficient, to be honest.
yeah.
Yep.
Great. We've got a comment in the chat. Amazing, great webinar. Jordan was great, really useful, well explained, and very, very interesting. Thank you very much.
Oh,
So, no,
thank you.
there you go. Thank you for joining, and I'm glad you found it beneficial. Folks, I popped a link in the chat. We have an AI webinar coming up in the new year about the future of marketing. If you've got any final questions, don't hesitate to get those in the chat now. But again, if you're doing Google Ads in house, if you are wanting to do more within Google Ads, if you're keen to discover more about how obviously Wagger delivers this type of work as an agency, don't hesitate to reach out, drop me a line. We'll be sending you a follow-up. It'd be great to take the conversation further and indeed see if there's an opportunity to work together. So, Jordan, thank you again for your time. Loads of great
Thanks.
insight. And to everybody on the call, thank you for joining. Best of luck and enjoy the follow-up. And please do distribute and share with your team. If you enjoyed this session, get online as well. Shout about it on LinkedIn. Goes a long, long way. Or indeed, leave us a little review on Google. Another positive comment from Claire. Great webinar, very insightful. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Listen, thank you ever so much for joining. Well done, Jordan. Cheers, folks, and have a great
Cheers.
rest of the week and a really good weekend when it finally comes around. Cheers, folks. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.